Hello and welcome back to Tear Us Apart. In today's episode, we'll be discussing a huge result in Europe in midweek as Manchester City fell to a 4-1 defeat away in Lisbon as Ruben Amorim Sporting ran out 4-1 victors in the Portuguese capital. The Portuguese manager will be joining, of course, Manchester United after the international break. We'll be looking ahead to those final games this upcoming weekend before the international break with a view to Amorim's arrival at Old Trafford. But I think at the time of recording, fresh off the back of that 4-1 win for Sporting, it's Pep's heaviest defeat as City manager in Europe since 2016, his first season. We'll go straight to that and touch on, well, I suppose we've obviously not covered the City's previous defeat to Bournemouth at the weekend as well, which is by all means it's now three straight defeats for City, which is quite the rare occasion. We'll I guess as it we'll cover City's issues in quotation marks as a blanket term. So Dan, I know you watched the Bournemouth game. I know you watched the Sporting game. That's one more game you watched than me. I only watched the Sporting match. Um, what do you think the issues are with City right now? Because to me, it seems like there's issues all over the park. We're not. I say we Haaland's not really being as clinical as he can be up front. Defensively, we're getting ran through. We concede a lot of chances. Midfield, not a lot of legs there, and I've seen a lot of people raising concerns about maybe even that lack of desire. So, how big do you think these wider picture issues are for City? Because we'll start from a City perspective before we move on to how what this means for United.
Yeah, I think you've highlighted probably the key to things that have gone wrong for City is speak about the defense there. How stretched it is. It just seems really stretched at the moment, that City defense, and easy for attackers to get in behind. Equally, you've got to look at the injuries. Ruben Diaz, John Stones, starting Simpson Pussy at centre half, his European debut in such a big game as well. You think
Baptism of
against
fire
literally against
against
the
one of the most informed strikers, as you're about to mention, I assume.
yeah, and the Portuguese champions. It's like it's a
Yeah.
really tough game to go into. Whether Pep would look on that decision and think, should he have started him? I don't know, but you could maybe say if Stones and Diaz were in that back line, to not as many chances happen on Edison's goal. Let's put it that way. So yeah, put it on injuries. The thing is, though, we've seen City have injuries in the past, and their so-called B team has come out and still beaten these types of teams like Sporting Lisbon in Europe. But this time, why is it not clicking? You think about the players who have been brought in. I know there's obviously more of an academy feel that's coming in now, but the players who Pep's brought in as sort of second-hand players into City, you think that they've got that experience that these current crop of players from the so-called B team haven't got, I don't think. So going into these big European matches, that's something that you can't really get until you've played in those type of games. Equally up front, we spoke about Haaland. It was a tough atmosphere. That's one of the toughest atmospheres I've watched City play in
I watched it
throughout
without
Pep's
commentary,
there.
without audio, so
Oh,
I don't exactly know about that, but yeah, I'll take
yeah,
your word for it.
yeah. It was not as hostile as Anfield, but I'd say it's
Mm.
probably second best. You've probably watched more games and know more atmospheres that have been harder for City to play in. But yeah, it's a key element of injuries that have happened, and no Rodri is a massive factor. I mean, I'm not saying that City would go and win the game if Rodri was there, but they'd have obviously a highly more likely better chance. But from your perspective, from what you've heard, from what you've seen, what do you think of the situation at the moment?
Yeah, I think you touched on it there. I think it's just I don't want to make excuses because I think, like I say, I only watched the Sporting game, didn't watch the Bournemouth game. From what I heard of the Bournemouth game, it just seemed like, and even the players themselves have said it in the press since that Bournemouth were just a better team and City weren't up to scratch, and that's kind of the way it is, especially in the early days of the season. It's like City famously have these fluke results. Well, you say fluke, we have three defeats in a row, but we have these results in the early stages of the season when we're still clicking, and then come the second half of the season, Pep sorts it out. But yeah, I don't want to make excuses for City because I think it was kind of a case of not really doing the fundamentals right. Like I touched on it earlier with missing chances, even the just like you say, conceding chances. But the basics of defending, they haven't been right for a while. But that's with or without Simpson Pusey, who didn't make any glaring errors. I mean, he didn't cover
Yeah.
himself in glory for that Gyökeres opener, but like, you know, what can you expect when you're giving a 19-year-old his professional senior full debut in a situation like that? I mean, we had Ake on the bench, but that brings me on to the point of injuries where the injury list was building up quite significantly, where we only had like five outfield players on the bench, if that, at the point at a couple of games ago, maybe. A few of those players came back at the weekend. Like we had Walker obviously started, De Bruyne, Doku. They made the returns to the bench but weren't used. And then today, obviously Ake played at the weekend, played against Spurs, but he played Simpson Pusey over him just purely because he probably didn't want to aggravate that injury. But I know it's kind of with the Champions League now being 8 games, you've kind of got a bit more leeway to afford a result like that because I was saying to
Yeah,
someone in the pub actually when I was watching it that like I even before the even before like grasping the context of the sporting game, I thought that Sporting away was a tougher prospect than Juventus and PSG away, who are our last two tough games on paper, if you know what I mean. Because we've got Club
yeah,
Brugge and Feyenoord, obviously tough games, but in terms of the big names, I think this Sporting game was always going to be harder. Add to that the context of our injuries. Like I say, I don't want to make excuses because I think we should have played, we could have done a lot better. But I think maybe if Kevin De Bruyne had started, or like I say, he was on the bench last week and didn't get on. Like, what's the point in having him there if he's
yeah,
not going to come on? He came on tonight at a point where the game was already lost, and he just looked frustrated because, well, one, he conceded a foul, and yeah, that
yeah.
brings me on
It
to
was
the final overall encompassing point. Tonight wasn't. I say tonight. We are recording after the game. Tonight wasn't our night. It wasn't City's night. It wasn't our day at the office. If you were like, if Haaland puts that penalty away, then we've got a second goal and we've probably in the ascendancy to go and get an equaliser then. And I think all three penalties given in the game were a bit contentious. And I think I know we will come on to Ruben Amorim and what this means for him and United, but as much as he deserves the credit for they defended really well and some of the fluid attacking counter attacking moves that he played were fantastic. I still think there's an element of fortune to it, and I think if City put away those chances, you saw the stats at half time, the amount of chances we had in that first
yeah,
half. Haaland had a couple of sitters in that first half, and their keeper was calling to action on many occasions to keep them in the game, really. So I think another day those go in, and it's a different story, but that's just football.
yeah. I
And then we're in the current situation we are, where Amorim comes away with a really impressive 4-1 win, and he deserves credit for that.
I think just final point on the injuries. You think about Pep in recent seasons when De Bruyne has come back, he's rushed him in too much. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
he's
he's probably
thought,
cautious. Yeah,
yeah. So that's probably what he was thinking. Maybe bringing him on the bench against Bournemouth, just getting that match day feel back into him possibly, and then obviously bringing him on today. And then the Walker situation as well, not training 19 days before playing Bournemouth, which isn't really ideal, is it really?
mm,
So that was a
yeah,
tough game. 32 match unbeaten run though came to an end. I mean,
yeah, it
the
did.
fourth best in Prem history,
Mm.
so it's another
He
accolade
was
to have.
always going to win, wasn't it?
It was weird though because against the Bournemouth, against Bournemouth, it was two different styles of approaches from the opposition. You saw Bournemouth; they really attacked the midfield aggressively, City's midfield, and then forced them out wide. And then they didn't high press, but they just seemed a lot more aggressive. And then Sporting sort of were a bit more laboured in the fact that they sat back a bit
They did
more,
sit back.
invited
Yeah,
City onto them, and then just tried to win the one-on-one duels in the second half. And when you've got someone like Gyökeres up front, who's just an absolute beast. I mean, he was bullying City's back three, wasn't he? But let's be
yeah.
honest.
He could have scored more himself. To be fair to him, I think.
Yeah. Um, something was always going to happen with him up front, definitely. With the Amaron situation, though, I'm sure we'll come on to it now, but it's a huge step for him. But watching that first half, I won't get too carried away, even though it was a 4-1
Yeah,
win, obviously.
yeah, yeah. Like that's the thing. It's kind of football fans. Yeah, that's the thing. I think, like I was saying, in terms of in another day, if we score those chances, I think a football fans outlook on a certain situation can change just on how things go. If you that sounds very basic, but like
I
if
know what you mean.
a
Yeah,
good, you know what I mean? Like if there's a different result, then City aren't in this crisis all of a sudden, whereas like these issues are still ongoing. They're not going to fix themselves. Like just a few, and to be honest with you, that like leads me on to another point. We've not been playing really well since August, to be honest, and we've kind of been getting away with it, having scraping these wins, and obviously we're still there competing at the top because that we've got that quality and we do keep grinding out these wins. But there's definitely there's definitely something that's not right. I don't know if it's whether the system or maybe it is just Rodri is that important. Maybe he is, but so I think Pep has got to look at it and got to change it now. Bernardo Silva even said after the game, we've got to look at ourselves and do something because we're in a dark place. I think he said something's not
Yeah,
right. Um, so yeah, I think as I was saying earlier, in terms of obviously Amorim deserves credit and Sporting deserve credit, there was definitely shades in terms of the way City capitulated. There was shades of that Real Madrid game in 2022 where a few goals after one another
yeah,
absolutely finish you because 1-1 at the break. City by far the better team in that first half. Could have been winning by a few more. Well, could have been winning. Fast forward into that second half, 20 seconds in, and Sporting have gone ahead. That's already gonna affect the mindsets of those City players who have just had a pep talk from the
yeah.
manager, and then split and score again a few minutes later, and then there you go. Now it goes from a one goal deficit to a mountain to climb, and then that I think that was a massive psychological impact. And then when Haaland misses that penalty, the heads are bound to go because it's like this just isn't our night.
Yeah.
Conceded a fluky penalty at the end with Nunes, and yeah, it was just disaster.
If
That
you
second 45 was just a disaster.
if you look back on probably when Pep eventually leaves City at his time, you could probably say that's the only negative when City do get two goals against them in quick succession. They find it
Yeah,
hard to respond. It's
little
like in
flurries of goals. Yeah,
it's like
definitely
in
a
the
big
FA Cup
trend.
final as well, isn't it? When United
Yeah, yeah,
scored, Rashford scored, obviously it was disallowed, and then they go and score again.
yeah,
It's like that's the quick succession. It's really hard to obviously come back from it, especially as when it's City, all the oppositions tend to sit back, of course, don't they?
yeah,
So it makes it even harder rather than them
yeah,
giving it a game and playing out. But I don't think, obviously, it's a massive loss, don't get me wrong, but
yeah,
this mini crisis, so to call it, it's
yeah.
not an easy fix, but Pep always finds a way, doesn't
Exactly. That's the thing. The point that needs to be reinstated to some of the online City fans who are being a bit reactionary with this defeat. Like, yeah, things things aren't great right now, but like I said, we're still
he? Yeah.
well in the title
And
fight. We're
it,
still competing at the top of the Champions League.
it's happened before, hasn't it? What
Yeah,
City's in 2018, City lost three games in a row. Look what happened
yeah,
there. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
So
And that was at a later stage in the season. We've come back from plenty of worse positions, so just I do kind of think, like you were saying, in terms of like the B team's not quite what it used to be. Like we won at Sporting at the Jose Alvalade 5-0
yeah,
2.5 years ago. In the first leg of the round of 16. That was pre Gyökeres, but it was still Ruben Amorim. They were still Portuguese champions at the time, if I'm not mistaken, or at
yeah,
least competing.
2021. Yeah,
Yeah. So and they had Nunes at the time as well. But yeah, there's definitely something to be said there because we in the summer all we saw him was Savinho, who's been very good so far, and Gundogan, who we signed not with the intention that he was going to play as much as he had because now he's played this much, his age is starting to show a bit because he was class for Barcelona, he was class for Germany at the Euros. For getting him for free, we were thinking this is perfect little squad player,
yeah,
perfect little player to come in, and he's been a lot's been demanded of him, and he's not quite met that. I don't know if that's probably partly in due to having to fill in for Rodri, who, like I've said many times in this podcast before, Rodri effectively plays the role of two players, and when you've got a 33-year-old Gundogan who didn't play against Sporting, I must add, but alongside like a 30-year-old Kovacic as well, it's it's no real secret why that midfield's getting ran through, and that's definitely one of the
yeah.
main issues that he needs to fix because you can't just, as the famous quote goes, you can't win everything with kids. So
Heard that
it's
before.
like on the bench we just got pure academy lads, and it's obviously good for the academy, but these lads can't really be relied upon. So I think there's definitely questions to be asked.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. They gave Spurs a really, really good game.
Yeah,
Obviously,
yeah,
you
we
were
did.
there.
We played
Uh,
better against Spurs probably.
yeah, and that had probably more academy players in it than the
Yeah,
last two games put together. But
yeah,
I mentioned about the experience. You think Julian Alvarez has gone, not been replaced. Cole Palmer's gone. You could say Savinho was a possible replacement. I see him as a Mahrez replacement a little bit more.
yeah,
Then Rico Lewis compared to João Cancelo, experience wise, João Cancelo's on another planet. But
yeah,
obviously it'll come with time, won't it? But yeah, I'm sure. like I said before, Pep will find a way.
Yeah, that is the thing we need to remember. And I saw another point on Twitter actually about like you saying there in terms of replacing players. When we had that B team, so to speak, we had Sterling, Jesus, who were still like rotating, and you always knew you could get some kind of productivity out of them. And when you look at them two, Mahrez, Sané, Alvarez, and you look at all their numbers in terms of productivity, they were always delivering and in limited minutes. Well, I say limited compared to the regular starters. They were always delivering, and I think it's a good point to be made because outside of Haaland and when Foden obviously scored against Spurring, but like outside of them two, you've not got a lot of productivity from the wide areas, especially with De Bruyne and Gundogan's not the same player in terms of making those late runs into the box, and we don't have Rodri to come up with a clutch goal. So there's a lot of elements to it, and I think we'll know more when we get a fully fit Kevin De Bruyne back. Also, we're not going to get Rodri back this season, but we've still got Diaz and Stones, Grealish, Oscar Bob. I think could still have a big impact
Yeah.
in the new year. So like I say, it's early days. Like you say, Pep will find a way, and yeah, that's probably all we need to say about City tonight.
I'm a big fan of the game, and I thought Gyökeres, I'm sure you want to mention in a minute. He was sensational.
Yeah, of course, he scored a hat trick. And I know Ruben Amorim came out afterwards and said, out of respect for Sporting, he won't be in the transfer market trying to buy him, which is fair enough. You can understand why.
Yeah.
But if he comes free in the summer, not on a free, of course, but if he becomes free and available for someone to buy him, surely United have got to be in there. You think if Rasmus Højlund doesn't develop over the next couple of months or the span where Ruben Amorim's in charge from 11th of November until the end of the season, if Højlund's not improved or Xerxes, you'd think go out and get Gyökeres, surely.
Yeah, I mean he's the most on-form striker in the world right now, no doubt about it. And according to the Times, he's got a 63 million pound release clause potentially next year,
Who does
as
that
little
remind you
as.
of?
Um,
Who else
yeah,
had that? Yeah.
but I think the tricky thing is United obviously have bought two strikers in 2 summers, and Rasmus Højlund cost 72 million pounds, and Xerxes was only like 34 million pounds. But I doubt they get rid of Xerxes after a year. And call me crazy, but I think Højlund's got very, very, very similar attributes
Yeah.
to Gyökeres. The way he likes to run the channels. Granted, I think Gyökeres might be a little bit quicker. Højlund's quick, but Gyökeres looks really quick. And I loved his movement, Gyökeres. That's what stood out to me, his movement. He held the ball up decently, but not amazingly at times. But he was all on his own the first half a lot of times. But the movement when he was running the channels, I thought that was really good to see. And the way he strikes the ball, apart from that first one, but in the game on Friday, I was watching that when they won. What did they win? Five? Was it
Was it 4-1?
4-1?
Yeah.
Yeah, because he scored all four, didn't he?
Yeah, it was against
Um,
Estrella Amadora, I think.
yeah. So I mean, obviously it's different opposition, but he was really, really good then, running the channels and like, the way he struck the ball wasn't just like your typical striker's finish. It was like with proper venom and power, and it was really good to see. And even his second goal, was it his second goal? The one, no, it was his first goal. The one, it looked like he scuffed it, but it almost might be like not scuffed. It
No,
was that
yeah.
cute little finish.
Yeah, it was like a sort of a technical finish, wasn't it? Where he's Simpson Pusey's come along, and I was saying before, the whole of that back three of City got bullied by Gyökeres, and when he was
Mm,
through an open goal, he looked like it. I can see why you think that he might have scuffed it, but I think it was the technicality of actually chipping Edison and
mm.
making Edison feel like he's gonna go down to his bottom left maybe, but then yeah, he just sends it over the top, and a brilliant performance from him. Amarin takes over, like I said, on the 11th of November, so not too far now. And his first game in charge is on the 24th of November against Ipswich Town. During this international break, Ethan, of course, many players are going to be on international duty. So these next two games, PAOK and Leicester City for United, is this going to be sort of critical for players to prove why they should be in Amarin's squad now, do you think?
Yeah, yeah, of course. It's always an audition. When a new manager comes in, players will always get a new chance. I remember Alexis Sanchez was under Mourinho towards the end. He was basically not frozen out per se, but like his time under Mourinho was done. Then when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer comes in, he gets a new chance. Obviously, that's a weird example, but it's how it works. He will give every player a chance because that's how you have to be as a manager. And so they have to perform in these next games under Van Nistelrooy to prove their worth. But even if they don't perform well, they'll still get a chance under him because it's a completely different system, completely different manager, completely different environment. So it's important, but I think it's more just out of respect. I mean, obviously they should want to win every game, but out of respect, they should be trying to get United in the best possible position for his arrival, and hopefully putting United in a position where they're not sitting 13th, 14th in the league, maybe pushing a little bit higher up, and actually getting a win in the Europa League would be nice, because it's looking a little bit dubious what with 3 draws. So really need a victory here because he's got his work cut out otherwise. So yeah, I think it's certainly an audition for sure.
What are you feeling with United going into these sort of next 2 games? On paper, you think that United should be winning these games, but second in the Greek Super League, PAOK, they've got Dejan Lovren
Mm.
as well at the back, former Liverpool player. You'd think that United could beat PAOK, but we know that Leicester City team who United beat last week 5-2 was their so-called B team. So to see their A team come to Old Trafford, that'll be a much harder test for this United set of players compared to last week, won't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think realistically, if United feel like they deserve to be in the Europa League, which you could say they didn't after such a poor performance in the league last year, finishing eighth, but then they won the FA Cup against City, so it is deserved. But if they want to be in the Europa League and if they want to win silverware this year, you've got to be beating PAOK at home. You should be beating 20 at home. I know Ten Hag, which is one of those things which sort of pushed us away as fans, away from supporting him, was his comments like going to Porto away and going to Fenerbahce away was 2 good draws. When you're Manchester United, you should be winning both or at least 4 points from 6. Do you know? But PAOK at home, you got to win. There is no excuses. I think the standards have slipped so far now that people are thinking, well, it might be a draw. That cannot be acceptable. If you want to win the Europa League, United are one of the strongest teams on paper in this. If they want to win the Europa League, they got to win it. And I think Van Nistelrooy on Sunday against Chelsea, United looked solid. United got a lot of the criticism in the media, particularly from in the studio in Sky Sports from Roy Keane and Gary Neville. But I think if you take a step back and think for a minute, they were getting like belters when Chelsea are the one with a manager that's been there longer now, and Chelsea are the one that spent more money, and they were the worst team. Chelsea looked weaker of the two sides. United looked like they were going to win it more. Chelsea did very little for a team that's meant to be going in the right direction. Like people have been very positive about Chelsea this season, and they didn't look very good at all. And yes, Chelsea always struggle against United, but United looked the better side, and with a few things going their way, potentially some better decision making from players, United would have won that game. So I think it's a little bit sort of sometimes I think the criticism can be a bit. That's kind of what you get when you've got a lot of the press in Sky being ex-United. They'll either be really positive or really negative, and it's usually very negative. But to be fair, they are just in saying that because a lot of the time it is negative at United. But my point is, Ruben Nistelrooy, I thought it looked a lot more solid against Chelsea. And I think that's a platform to build on. And I think United should go out and beat PAOK and then should beat Leicester. Yes, it's their stronger side, but I think United should have what it takes to beat Leicester City. And you'd hope so, considering Leicester aren't exactly high flyers in the league. They're doing quite well. They're doing better than people expected, but United do need to win this game. And I think it will be the perfect opportunities to get 6 points before the international break and give Amorim the time to implement his tactics, even though they're not, most of them aren't training, but it's sort of a useful-ish break for him to come and get settled before the first league game of the season against Ipswich.
2 of the players that are returning to training are Lenny Oro and Mason Mount, of course. It's a bit weird, isn't it? Because you think that Lenny Oro's been brought in by Ten Hag. He's been labelled as this generational talent. But in many ways, I do think that even though Ten Hag has brought him in, Amaron putting him in a back three doesn't seem too bad of an idea. I don't think many United fans would feel because you think you've got that solid core three at the back with Martinez, De Ligt, and Yoro. That seems obviously what it would look like. But Yoro's not even played any minutes in the Premier League yet, which is crazy.
No, yeah, it is. It's weird because you almost forget about him a little bit because he was obviously brought in August. Was it August? No, it was July. He was brought in, and then obviously he Was it his meniscus?
Yeah, I
I,
think it was.
something like that. And obviously he was out for 3, 4 months. So, like you almost forget about him. It's like the 6th of November now. I remember that when it happened, they were like 3 months. We're like, wow, that's a long way away. And here we are
Yeah,
now. Time
I
flies,
know.
eh?
Yeah,
Literally time flies. But yeah, I think it was all, it wasn't really an Eric Ten Hag signing. I think it was an Ineos signing, which is good because it means he'll fit the next system. And it will be very interesting to see him in a back three. Obviously, it's quite a lot for him now to come in. He needs to come in and adjust to the Premier League, but also adjust to Amorim's back three. It's a completely different ball game. So yeah, it'll be very interesting. But I guess it does help. It's probably easier to come into a back three than it is a back two in a sense that you've got extra cover. Maybe not if you're not used to it. It depends which side they want to play him. Do they play him in the centre? They play him off the left or the right. One thing that I will say is it's useful because Harry Maguire's obviously played in a back five for England quite a lot. So he'll be very comfortable fitting in. And I think he sometimes looks his best in a back five. So he's been a very good backup for United. I think he could come in very handy as well. But I also think, I know I keep talking here, but I think it's also very useful that Victor Lindelof didn't get sold in the summer because now you've got a back
yeah,
three. You almost need three centre half replacements. So it sort of changes that. You need six, which is very useful to have Lindelof still. So yeah, I think it'll be very interesting to see Yoro back, and Malacia is also getting closer. I've
yeah,
heard, so that'll be like beyond weird seeing him on the pitch because it'll be almost 2 years now, which is crazy, and it's a horrible thing to hear. Really, like you just don't want to see a player out for 2 years. So hopefully he can really hit the ground running, but people have to give him time because 2 years is a long time. And obviously Mason Mount coming back, I don't know how it took so long for a scratch on his head, but hopefully he can start to build some sort of consistency and fitness, like let alone consistency on the pitch. Actually keep. I don't think he's played a run of 5 games for United consistently. He always gets injured. And we just can't have that. I paid 60 million for him. It just looks like one of those signings where we've got it wrong again.
that is a really valid point though about the back three, and if say any of them got injured, who would come in and replace them? The one person who I think might benefit from a back three, and we don't realize it, is probably Luke Shaw. If he can't play as a wing back so much as as he used to probably a couple of seasons ago, if you put him in a back three, it doesn't seem like too much of a terrible idea. But equally, he might not want to play in a back three because I know that obviously the wing backs for Amarin are so important, pressing
Mhm.
high. And there's a lot of demands on his wing backs. And I look at Luke Shaw. I think Diogo Dalot could probably do it or give it a go. But I look
Yeah.
at Shaw and I think, can he keep up with those intensity levels for 90 minutes? Possibly
Mm.
not. But I suppose that's Amarin's decision, isn't it?
That's sort of why we're being linked back to Fernandez. I think Alvaro Fernandez. I think it feels like another Pog, but obviously very different because the buyback would only be about 16 million pounds. But it just feels like it looks a bit silly that you sell him in the summer and in January you're going, "Oh, can we have you back?"
Yeah.
Obviously, they didn't know that Ten Hag was going to get sacked and that they're going to bring an Amorim, but it's a bit unfortunate. I think what is definite is that United do need a left back. It's just ironic. By the time January comes, we could now have two left backs again. So
Yeah.
do you bring one in, or but I don't know. I think yeah, on the right hand side, I think it's pretty secure in the fact that Delo could probably do it, and he can keep doing his little runs into the box then with a bit more safety behind it.
It,
Whereas on the left hand side, it just depends whether Shaw's where he'll be because he's been out since February, I think. So a long old time considering. Obviously, he made it back for England and then out for United. So I think Shaw's probably gotta make a statement now. If he's to stay at United, I think he has to keep fit now for the remainder of the season. And if he doesn't, I think he could get let go or a replacement will be signed on a permanent because his fitness has been terrible since he joined in 2014. He's missed more games than he's played, I think. There's a statistic like that. So yeah, I think Shaw's got a lot to prove, and I think he has to show that he can fit in the back in a wing back or in the left centre back. And he did do it, to be fair. He's played left
yeah.
centre back for United and he's played well. So I mean, Ten Hag used him a lot and he did look good. So he can fill in there, but I'd like to see him at left wing back because when he does get up to speed, he is brilliant. He's one of the best fullbacks in the world. But whether he can, we'll have to see.
Yeah, the cries of Shawberto Carlos may come again. We'll see.
Feels
But
like a long time ago that.
one player who I thought has played out of his skin recently for United, Noussair Mazraoui, has been excellent.
Oh, sensational against
And
Chelsea.
I know we talk about Dalot obviously being nailed on to play in that right wing back slot. it's such a shame though because you think where does Mazraoui fit into this new Amorim team?
Hmm.
Not as a number 10, I can guarantee you
Yeah,
that.
I hope not.
So yeah, I don't know, but we'll see. But he'd be a good backup anyway, and
But
equally, he was
it's nice to
attacking
see.
at Ajax. So
Yeah, exactly. It's nice to see depth. I think sometimes we forget as fans that it's not a problem to have two players in a good position. You don't have to shoehorn them in. That's good. If they compete with each other, that's good. And Mazraoui was fantastic against Chelsea, and he warrants his place starting next week. Um, whether that's in Amorim's plans, who knows? But I think it's a good thing.
we'll move on to Manchester United and their new stadium that could be happening after a release survey of 52% of fans voted for a new stadium. What have you made of these numbers and figures, Ethan?
I think it's really interesting. Obviously, they've delayed it now, the decision till next year, in sort of an idea of hoping that they can sort of because they've got some issues with the trains, I think, or some company like in terms of land where you're building the stadium. If you build it exactly on the blueprint of Old Trafford, there's sort of restrictions into what you can do. So I sort of see why they're delaying it a little bit because if you're going to do it, you might as well do it right. There's no point like rushing. Oh, let's just get a new stadium. Do you know what I mean? Let's get it right. But obviously, 52% is very interesting. Of this, it said the younger fans lean to a redevelopment, which you'd think would be the other way around. That the younger fans would lean towards a new stadium because it's like they wouldn't know the history so much. So that's quite an interesting. That would go against what I would have predicted. 31% said they wanted the Old Trafford redevelopment, and 17% said they were unsure. So yeah, like it's not a resounding majority, but it is a majority. And they've asked the fans, they've asked the season ticket holders, they've asked the members, and I think these are the right people to ask. And that's what the fans have said, but obviously it's not just up to the fans, but it's good to have that input and I'm glad they're asking. And I think it's very interesting to see what they'll do. I mean, I think the majority of fans want to sort of see that Old Trafford will take a lot of work to make it what it should be and wouldn't mind a new stadium, but it needs to have the feeling of Old Trafford. It can't lose that and just feel like a new build completely. I think that's the crucial thing is making it feel like a Manchester United stadium with history behind it. Obviously, it's a new build, but if it has that feeling of history behind it, I think that's what will be a good decision. Because obviously, 100K seats like that is mental, but it needs to have that meaning.
Yeah, bang on. And you think from a fan's perspective as well, how much ticket prices will go up, season ticket prices.
Worrying
Like
that.
like you say, the working class man every single season isn't gonna be able to pay for his season ticket. It's really worrying times. And when I went over to an American football game in summer recently, like the jerseys are going for £120, which is just ridiculous. And
Yeah.
football's already at that, you could say, at the moment with these player edition shirts. But it does seem like the commercialization of the game is slowly even more creeping up. And with a new stadium, that's going to be key to it.
Yeah, I think it's sort of scary to think about. Obviously, they'll want to make their money back um, as much as possible, and it's sort of scary. How much will they charge for merchandise? How much will they charge to look around the stadium, but in like a tour, the museum?
Yeah.
Will they put that up? Will they put ticket prices up? Like I'd like to think they wouldn't because it's a bigger stadium with more seats. You'll make more money, more generate more revenue. Obviously, this is going to cost billions, but you know, uh, we're not that. Unfortunately, we are not the main priority, and it is about a business decision. And I think financials will come into it and will probably take priority, and it will be the working class that are priced out of it. And I think that is the problem with football. And I think that's been the problem with football for a long time now. But there's no point going and banging on about it because we can't change anything about that. We can only address it, and it's a worrying thing. But hopefully, Sir Jim Ratcliffe obviously got Manchester links. I think was he brought up in Manchester or was it just that he was a United fan? I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I think it's from Staley Bridge, so like near Oldham that way.
Right. So yeah, and I don't know exactly what his childhood was like and whether he was wealthy, but you'd like to think that he sort of understands a bit, and so hopefully he can sort of be a voice for the voiceless. And with all these like meetings with people from the fan base, from the Man United Sports Trust, etc. you'd like to think that hopefully they can represent the working class and maybe ticket prices won't go up. But obviously the season tickets went up this year. And I do fear that they would go up again with the new stadium because they knew allure and they knew they could make more money because tourists will come.
Yeah, I think it's indefinite that it's going to happen, really, isn't it? Anyway, that's all we've got time for this week. If you did enjoy the podcast episode and you're listening on Spotify, make sure to give us a 5-star rating if you did like it, and also leave us a review on YouTube as well if you're watching us here. We'll give you a wave now. Make sure to give us a subscribe. I was going to say drop a follow then, but no. Subscribe to us, please. And at Tear Us Apart Pod is our handle for our social media accounts as well. So yeah, make sure to go there to keep up with your latest Manchester United, Manchester City news. But that's it for this week, and we'll see you next week. Bye bye.